Olaus, from his blog driftlesscatholic.wordpress.com, wrote the following. Quote, "One accusation against Catholic traditionalism is that it's a bunch of LARPing. Live action role-playing. Live action role-playing means that self-identifying traditional Catholics adopt a number of signifiers of another time and place that they identify as more authentically Catholic than their own culture. They use these signifiers to escape into a fantasy world where they imagine themselves as Crusader Knights or Latter-day Chestertons and Bellics, etc. Basically, anything Charles Coulomb promotes falls under the accusation of LARPing."
Ooh.
End quote.
I could LARP that right up. No, well, let's see. Boy, what do you say to that? Well, firstly, one does hear these sorts of charges on that, and I'm always reminded of what J.R.R. Tolkien said. And, I mean, he was the king of fantasy, if ever there was one. Of course, bear in mind, he was the king of fantasy, but he was far more learned than the vast majority of us, and had been on the sun, seen all his best friends killed. So he had a real life and a real education, like which most of us don't have, so you can cut him a little bit of slack. But he had a wonderful line about this. He said, "It's easy to debunk escapism, but notice that the people who do so are usually the jailers." And the truth of the matter is, the statement presumes some sort of perfection on the part of the here and now. You can't live in dreams, but if you don't have them, if you don't have an idea that there is something, somewhere or somewhen better than what you've got at the moment, you've got nothing to say. Shut up. Shut up and enjoy the here and now. All is good in this best of all possible worlds. Unless it isn't. But then if it isn't, where do you look for alternatives? We come back to elsewhere and elsewhen. If I don't like the type of shoe I'm wearing, I've got to find some other type of shoe. Okay, well, where am I going to do that? Not the same kind of shoe, not the store where I bought these. Got to look for something else. If I don't like what's on the menu at a restaurant, I need to go somewhere else or try to order off the menu. Sorry.
Yeah.
couldn't resist that one. The fact of the matter is that sure, we all know people who LARP. I mean, I know people who regularly vote in federal elections, as I do myself, thinking that this is some sort of civic duty, the way we were taught in the 50s and 60s. This is LARPing. The Scouts, you know, I'm an Eagle Scout, very proud of it. I am, I'm sorry to say, a relic of another America. The America of Irving Berlin and Norman Rockwell. And you know, it's easy to want to LARP back into that. But those days are dead. They're gone. We've got the here and now. The America of Mr. Justice Anthony Kennedy, where one man can LARP into same-sex marriage for all of us. Isn't that beautiful? So, I don't know what to say.
Don't you think it's a hopeful sign that LARPing, as Olaus defines it, is now a thing? It didn't used to be a thing. Nobody would LARP.
No.
But now they are. Now, isn't that a sign that more men are identifying with chivalrous values and ideals?
To some degree. I mean, of course, some of them are going off in neo-paganry and whatnot. But I mean, look, you've got several things going on at once. If, on the one hand, you've got a system that is anti-Catholic, then you have to admit that it's a bad system. That's the first thing. If it's a bad system, then the second thing is you have to hope that people would notice that it was bad. The third step, and this is the tough one, however, is convincing them that there's a good and that there are alternatives. Now, understand, I tried to do this in my book, Star Spangled Crown. The application of better principles to our society would not create anything quite like anything that's ever been before. Because history doesn't work like that.
Mm-hmm.
But what you do see is that very often people who are trying to restore something better come up with something pretty neat. It's not what they were attempting. They come up with something better than what they had. The Neo-Gothic movement in architecture, for instance, in England and Europe and America, did not build a new Chartres Cathedral, a new Notre Dame, but it built St. Patrick's. And I think St. Patrick's is pretty good.
Yeah.
Similarly, any of these sorts of revival movements in architecture or art, they don't really bring the past back, but they do end up creating lovely things, good things on their own. And that's something that we have to remember. We do have to give a certain amount of leeway to the human genius. We do have one, you know. One of the funniest was, this isn't apropos of anything, but one of the funniest architectural titles I've ever heard is Queen Anne Revival, which is those big Victorian houses with cupolas and all that. What that's got to do with Queen Anne, I couldn't tell you. But they call it Queen Anne Revival. So I hope she's happy wherever she is. That she was revived at least in the 1890s. But anyway, so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think you're right. LARPing is a hopeful sign rather than otherwise, because it shows a discontent with what we have. And that discontent is very important, unless you think what we've got is the cat's meow. And if you do, then enjoy it and shut up. You have nothing to tell me anyway. The other thing I'd also point out is that so many millennials and older people beyond them spend so much time in front of the computer doing role-playing games. Isn't it at least a healthy thing to get them up out of their chairs and out doing something live action?
There's all sorts of fantasy role play, fantasy sports, where you pretend to own teams.
Well,
There's
yeah,
plenty of that.
Yeah, us Dodgers, we're gonna murder you, Yankees. Yeah, pal. I'm gonna drag my gut out onto the baseball diamond and run. Yeah, that's gonna happen. No, what's really gonna happen is I'll sit in the bleachers, drinking beer, eating my hot dog, and by the way, adding to my paunch, you know, with the kind of stuff they serve at those parks. And I'll be waving the flag and all this sort of waving the pennant. Go. Every time there's a home run, I'll be jumping up and down. What has it got to do with me? It's a fantasy. And for the players, it's not a fantasy in the sense that they're being paid millions of dollars. That's real. But in the sense that the team they're opposing really stands for anything different than theirs, or that they have a greater loyalty to the town that their team is from. No.
Yeah.
Because if that were the case, you couldn't trade players.
Yeah.
No, Dodger blue, I'll die. But for that matter, if that were true, the Dodgers would never have deserted Brooklyn and come out here and ruin Chavez Ravine. Exactly. So it's all, you know, and as I go back to voting in elections, you know, and waving the flag, and don't get me wrong, on Memorial Day and Veterans Day and the 4th of July and all that, I love waving the flag, you betcha. But what does that flag really mean? Does it mean the Supreme Court and the Constitution? Does it mean abortion and sodomitical marriage? Is that what it means? Is that the flag I'm waving? I hope not. Is the flag that I'm waving the flag that I learned about as a Boy Scout, the same flag that forced the Scouts to adopt first gay members and then gay adults? Is that what I'm celebrating, really? No, I'm LARPing. Because when I wave the flag of the country I was born in, not the country I live in. And if that's LARPing, great. I'll live with it.